Don't scream. If they hear you, I can't guarantee you'll leave this room breathing. The voice sliced through the darkness like a blade, low, steady, foreign. Anita's breath caught in her throat. Please, God. Anyone. Anita Shumate pressed herself into the corner of the concrete cell, her white dress now a filthy gray from 3 days of terror. Again and again she tried to steady her breathing, but panic clawed at her chest in waves. She could hear boots stomping somewhere above her head. Heavy, deliberate, impatient. People had failed her before. The police never came when she called. Her neighbors pretended not to hear the screams. Even the passers-by on the street that night had looked right through her as the van doors slammed shut. She was just another invisible woman. Another statistic. Another body waiting to be shipped across borders like cargo. The iron door groaned open. Anita flinched, expecting the worst. But the silhouette that stepped into the flickering fluorescent light wasn't one of her captors. It was a man in a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, impossibly clean. His dark eyes found hers with unnerving precision. He extended one gloved hand. Come with me if you want to live. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm responding to everyone. Click subscribe, like this video. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want me to miss them. Let's begin. Anita didn't move, couldn't move. The man stood framed in the doorway like something out of a fever dream. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made the cramped cell feel even smaller. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that caught the sickly fluorescent light. The fabric looked expensive, the kind that whispered wealth with every movement. His white shirt was crisp beneath a vest, not a wrinkle in sight, and his black tie sat perfectly centered. It was obscene, really. The contrast. Him standing there like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom, while she huddled in filth and terror, her once white dress now the color of ash and despair. The concrete floor beneath her was stained with things she didn't want to think about. The walls wept with condensation and something darker. Rust, maybe, or old blood. The air reeked of mildew and human waste, thick enough to taste. And yet he didn't flinch, didn't wrinkle his nose or hesitate at the threshold. He simply stood there, one hand still extended, waiting. Who? Anita's voice cracked. She swallowed hard, tasting copper and fear. Who are you? Someone who's not supposed to be here, he said, his accent rolling the words into something melodic and foreign. Korean? Maybe. His English was flawless, but flavored with something else, something that made every syllable sound deliberate. And neither are you. She noticed his hand then, really noticed it. The glove was black leather, supple and fitted. No rings visible, but there was something about the way he held it out to her, palm up, fingers slightly curved. Not demanding, not grabbing, just offering. Behind him, the hallway was dark, but she could make out shapes. Bodies, maybe. She couldn't tell if they were sleeping, or... No. Don't think about it. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't need to. He took a single step forward, and the light hit his face fully for the first time. Anita's breath hitched. He was younger than his voice suggested, early 30s perhaps, with sharp, elegant features that looked carved rather than born. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark eyes that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Cold and calculating, but not cruel. Not yet. His black hair was swept back from his forehead, immaculate, despite whatever chaos had brought him here. There was blood on his collar. Just a fine mist of it, barely visible against the white fabric, but Anita saw it. Her gaze dropped to his hands, still gloved, still steady, and she wondered what they had done in the minutes before he'd opened her door. The men who brought you here, he continued, his tone conversational, almost casual, are no longer a concern. No longer a concern. The words were so clinical, so detached, as if he were discussing a canceled meeting rather than human lives. Are you police? Even as she asked it, she knew the answer. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. No, of course not. The police didn't wear tailored suits into basements, didn't move with the fluid grace of a predator, didn't leave blood mist on their collars, and then stand there looking like they'd just arrived for a gala. Then why? Because I wanted to. He said it simply, as if that explained everything, as if his wanting something was reason enough for it to happen. And because you were here, somewhere in the building, glass shattered. A man shouted, abrupt, panicked, and then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Anita's hands trembled against the concrete floor. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust this man, this stranger, who appeared from nowhere, wearing designer clothes and speaking in riddles. But what choice did she have? Stay here and wait for her captors to return? Hope the police would miraculously arrive after 3 days of praying? No, no one was coming to save her. No one except the monster in the expensive suit. "What's your name?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with those dark, fathomless eyes. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "Peng Ho," he finally said. Then, quieter, almost to himself, "Though most people call me something else." "What?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, something cold and ancient and utterly merciless. "The devil of the underground." He extended his hand again. "Now, are you coming, or would you prefer to wait for the next buyer?" Anita stared at his outstretched hand like it was a trap. Because maybe it was. Maybe this was just another variation of the same nightmare. A different predator. A more polished cage. The devil of the underground. The name alone should have sent her scrambling back into the corner, should have made her scream for help even though no help had come for 3 days. But his hand remained steady. Patient. Waiting. "I don't." Her voice broke again. She hated how weak she sounded. How small. "I don't know you." "No," Peng agreed, his tone unchanged. "You don't. You could be worse than them." Something flickered across his face. Not offense, but something closer to acknowledgement. "I could be." The honesty startled her. Most men would have lied, would have made promises about safety and protection, would have said anything to get her to comply. But Peng Ho stood there in his blood-speckled suit and simply agreed that yes, he might very well be worse than the men who had kidnapped her. "But right now," he continued, lowering his hand slightly but not withdrawing it, "I am the only option you have, and in approximately 90 seconds, reinforcements will arrive. When they do, I will leave, with or without you." It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact, delivered in that same measured, almost gentle tone. Anita's heart hammered against her ribs. Her legs had gone numb from sitting on the cold concrete for so long. She wasn't even sure she could stand, let alone run. And run where? She didn't know where she was. Somewhere industrial. Somewhere forgotten. The kind of place where screams went unheard and bodies went unfound. She looked past Peng into the hallway beyond. The darkness there seemed absolute, punctuated only by the weak spill of fluorescent light from her cell. She couldn't see the bodies she'd sensed earlier, but she could smell it now. Gunpowder and copper and something acrid that made her stomach turn. "How many?" she whispered. Peng didn't pretend to misunderstand. 6. 2 more upstairs. 8 men. He'd cut through 8 men to reach her cell. And he stood there without a scratch visible, without even breathing hard, looking like he'd done nothing more strenuous than sign a contract. What kind of monster could do that? But then again, what kind of monster offered his hand, instead of just dragging her out? "If I go with you," Anita said slowly, testing each word, "what happens to me?" "You live through the night." His dark eyes held hers. "Beyond that, I make no promises." That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be true. He shifted his weight slightly, and she caught the barest glimpse of something beneath his suit jacket, a holster, dark leather against his white shirt. "You want reassurance, call the police. You want to survive, take my hand." Anita's fingers twitched against the concrete. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that going with a self-proclaimed devil was just trading one hell for another. But the irrational part, the part that had kept her alive through 3 days of captivity, whispered something else. "He came for you. When no one else did, he came." Slowly, trembling so badly she thought she might shatter, Anita reached out. Her fingers barely brushed his gloved palm before he moved. His hand closed around hers, firm but not crushing, warm despite the leather, and he pulled her up in one smooth motion. Her legs buckled immediately, 3 days of sitting having stolen their strength, but he was already there, his other hand catching her elbow, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured, and for the first time his voice carried something other than clinical detachment. Not quite warmth, but close. "When did you last eat?" "I don't." Anita swayed, spots dancing in her vision. "Thursday, I think." 3 days. He made a sound low in his throat that might have been disapproval. His grip on her arm tightened fractionally, holding her upright. "Can you walk?" She wanted to say yes. Wanted to prove she wasn't completely helpless, wasn't just dead weight for him to carry. But when she tried to take a step, her knee gave out entirely. Peng caught her before she hit the floor. "Apparently not," he said, and there might have been the ghost of dry humor in his voice. He shifted his grip, one arm sliding around her back, the other beneath her knees. "This will be faster anyway." "Wait, I can." He lifted her like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest with the same ease someone might carry a briefcase. The expensive fabric of his suit was soft against her cheek, and beneath it, she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Calm, unhurried, like carrying traumatized women out of human trafficking dens was just another Tuesday for him. Maybe it was. "Don't scream," Peng said quietly, already moving toward the door. "I'm getting you out." The hallway was a nightmare, rendered in concrete and shadow. Anita kept her eyes fixed on Peng's face at first, focusing on the sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark eyes scanned the corridor with mechanical precision. Anything to avoid looking at what lay beyond the weak puddles of flickering light. But avoidance only lasted so long. The first body was slumped against the wall 3 meters from her cell, head tilted at an angle that necks weren't meant to achieve. The man's eyes were still open, staring at nothing, and there was surprisingly little blood. Just a dark stain spreading slowly across his chest. Clinical. Efficient. Anita's stomach lurched. "Don't look," Peng said quietly, adjusting his grip on her as he stepped over the corpse without breaking stride. His voice held no emotion, no remorse. Just a simple instruction, the way someone might tell you to mind the wet floor. She looked anyway. The second body was worse. This one had tried to run, she could tell by the position, sprawled face down in the middle of the corridor, arms outstretched as if reaching for salvation that never came. The back of his shirt was shredded, dark with blood that pooled beneath him in an ever-widening circle. "How did you?" Anita's voice came out strangled. "How did you do this alone?" "I wasn't alone." Peng navigated around the body with the grace of a dancer, never jostling her, never losing his balance, despite carrying her weight. "I had 8 bullets and the element of surprise. 8 bullets. 8 men." The math was too perfect, too terrifying. They reached a junction where 3 hallways met, and here the carnage multiplied. 2 bodies lay tangled together near an overturned metal table, as if they'd both been reaching for the same weapon when death found them. Shell casings littered the concrete floor, glinting like scattered coins in the fluorescent light. The walls were pockmarked with bullet holes, and one of the overhead lights swung on a loose wire, casting manic shadows that made the dead seem to move. Anita pressed her face against Peng's chest, squeezing her eyes shut. She could feel his heartbeat again through the layers of expensive fabric, still steady, still calm, as if he were carrying her through a garden instead of a graveyard of his own making. "Almost through the worst of it," he murmured, and she realized with a start that he was trying to comfort her, in his own way, with his own strange vocabulary of violence and mercy. His footsteps echoed in the concrete labyrinth, measured, purposeful, never hesitating. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, navigating the maze of corridors without pause. Left at the junction, then straight through a doorway with a broken lock hanging from the frame, then right down a narrower passage that smelled of rust and old machinery. "How do you know where to go?" Anita asked, desperate for something to focus on besides the carnage. "Blueprints." He ducked beneath a low-hanging pipe without slowing. This building used to be a meat processing plant. Abandoned in 2019. The basement layout hasn't changed. Of course he had blueprints. Of course he'd planned this down to the last detail. The devil of the underground didn't just stumble into human trafficking dens on a whim. They passed another body, this one seated against the wall with a phone still clutched in one hand. His thumb was frozen over the screen, a call that would never connect. Anita glimpsed the name on the display, Boss, before Peng turned down another corridor. "He was calling for help," she whispered. "Yes." "Did anyone answer?" "No." Peng's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I jammed all cellular signals within a 3-block radius before I entered the building." 3 blocks. He'd thought of everything, planned for every contingency, made sure that no one, not the police, not reinforcements, not even a desperate phone call, could interrupt what he'd come here to do. The realization settled over Anita like ice water. Peng Hu wasn't just powerful. He was methodical, precise. The kind of man who turned violence into an art form, who orchestrated death with the same attention to detail that others might apply to a wedding or a business merger. They emerged into a larger space, some kind of loading area with rusted metal doors and ancient conveyor belts that had long since stopped moving. Here, finally, the bodies ended. The concrete floor was cleaner, though still stained with decades of industrial grime. Peng's pace didn't slow. If anything, he moved faster now, his expensive shoes making sharp clicks against the floor. "The stairs are just ahead," he said. "Once we're up, we move quickly. No stopping. Understood?" Anita nodded against his chest, not trusting her voice. "Good." His arm tightened around her fractionally, protective, possessive. "Stay quiet. Stay close. And whatever you see upstairs, remember, they had 3 days to let you go. They chose not to." The stairwell erupted with sound before they'd climbed 3 steps. Shouting from above, raw, panicked voices overlapping in a language Anita didn't recognize. Russian, maybe. Then the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Bullets punching into concrete somewhere overhead, raining dust and chips of paint down on them. Peng reversed direction instantly. He pivoted on his heel with impossible speed, still holding her, and launched back down the stairs. Anita bit down on her tongue to keep from screaming, tasting blood, feeling every jarring impact as he took the steps 3 at a time. His breathing remained controlled, measured, even as he moved like liquid shadow through the basement corridor. "I thought you said 8, Anita gasped. "I did." His voice was tight now, focused. "These are new arrivals." More footsteps thundered above them, heavy boots on metal stairs, moving fast. Someone barked orders in that same foreign tongue, and the response came from multiple voices. At least 4, maybe 5. Too many. Peng cut left into a side corridor Anita hadn't noticed before, narrower than the others, barely wide enough for his shoulders. The fluorescent lights here were dead, leaving them in near total darkness. He slowed, but didn't stop, navigating by memory or instinct, or some sixth sense that made him more predator than man. "Reinforcements," he muttered, more to himself than her. Faster than anticipated. Behind them, the voices grew louder. Closer. Anita heard the distinct sound of someone chambering around, and her whole body went rigid. "They're going to find us," she whispered. "Yes." Peng shouldered through a door she hadn't seen, into what looked like an old electrical room. Rusted panels lined the walls, and the air smelled of copper and decay. He set her down carefully against the far wall, behind a bank of dead transformers. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Wait." Anita grabbed his sleeve, her fingers clutching the expensive fabric. "Don't leave me." His dark eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, she saw something flicker there. Not quite compassion, but its distant cousin. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of her fear. "I'm not leaving you," he said quietly. "I'm protecting you." "There's a difference." He straightened, his hand moving to the holster beneath his jacket. The gun that emerged was matte black, brutal in its simplicity. He checked the magazine with practiced efficiency. 3 bullets left, and his jaw tightened. "Not ideal," he murmured. The voices were right outside now. A beam of light swept across the doorway, and Anita pressed herself harder against the wall, making herself as small as possible. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain they'd hear it, certain it would give them away. Peng shrugged out of his suit jacket in one fluid motion. The garment was heavy, expensive, probably worth more than everything Anita had owned in her entire life. He draped it over her shoulders without ceremony, tucking it around her like a blanket. The silk lining was still warm from his body heat, and it smelled faintly of sandalwood and gunpowder. "If they come through that door," he whispered, leaning close enough that his breath stirred her hair, "you stay behind this equipment. You don't run, you don't scream, you wait for silence. Understand?" Anita nodded, pulling his jacket tighter around herself. The weight of it was strangely comforting, solid, and real, in a world that had become nothing but terror and shadows. Peng straightened, rolling his shoulders once. Without the jacket, he looked leaner, more dangerous. The white shirt stretched across his back as he moved, and she could see the outline of muscle beneath the fabric. Built for violence, she thought. Designed for it. The door handle rattled. Anita stopped breathing. A voice called out. Question or challenge, she couldn't tell. Another voice answered, closer to the door. The handle turned, rusty hinges beginning to creak. Peng's hand tightened on his gun. Then, miracle of miracles, a different voice, farther away, shouting something urgent. The handle stopped turning. Rapid conversation in that harsh foreign tongue, debate or argument. More shouting, growing distant. They were moving away. Checking other rooms, other corridors. Peng didn't lower his weapon. Didn't move at all except for the slow, controlled rhythm of his breathing. He stood like a statue between Anita and the door. A wall of flesh and bone and expensive fabric, ready to absorb whatever came through. Minutes stretched like hours. The voices faded entirely, swallowed by the concrete labyrinth. The only sound was the distant drip of water somewhere in the building's depths, and Anita's own ragged breathing. Still, Peng waited. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he lowered the gun. His shoulders relaxed fractionally, and he turned back to where Anita huddled beneath his jacket. "They're regrouping upstairs," he said quietly. "Probably waiting for us to make a run for it." "So what do we do?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first real expression she'd seen from him. "We don't give them what they expect." He reached down, offering his hand again. Anita took it without hesitation this time, and he pulled her to her feet. The jacket slipped from her shoulders, but he caught it, draping it back over her with that same silent care. "There's another exit," Peng said. "Through the old loading docks. We go now, while they're watching the stairs." They moved through the darkness like ghosts, Peng's hand firm around Anita's wrist as he guided her through corridors that all looked the same. The loading docks were somewhere to the east. He'd said so with the kind of certainty that suggested he'd memorized every inch of this godforsaken place. Anita's legs had found some strength again, enough to stumble along behind him without being carried. The jacket hung heavy on her shoulders, too large, the sleeves dangling past her hands. But she kept it wrapped tight, armor against the cold and the fear. They passed through what must have once been a break room, overturned chairs, a table with 3 legs, Graffiti scrawled across walls that had once been white. Peng moved with absolute confidence, never hesitating, his gun held low and ready. Too confident, maybe, because he didn't see the shadow shift behind the rusted vending machine. But Anita did. It was barely a movement, just the suggestion of darkness becoming more solid, taking shape. A man, pressed flat against the wall behind the machine, half hidden by the bulk of the old equipment. His breathing was shallow, controlled, and in his hands was something long and dark that caught the faint light from the hallway behind them. A rifle, pointed directly at Peng's back. Anita's throat closed. Her first instinct was to freeze, to let it happen, to accept that this was how it ended. 3 days of captivity had taught her that fighting back only made things worse, that silence was survival. But Peng had come for her when no one else had carried her through a basement full of corpses, had given her his jacket when he could have left her shivering in her ruined dress. The devil of the underground had shown her more mercy than any of the so-called good people in her life. She couldn't let him die because of something he'd missed. Down. The word tore out of her before she could think, before fear could strangle it. Peng dropped like a stone. The rifle shot cracked through the air where his head had been a heartbeat before, so close. Anita felt the displacement of air, heard the bullet punch into the concrete wall behind them. Chips of stone exploded outward, and she threw herself sideways, hitting the floor hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Peng rolled, came up in a crouch, and fired twice. The first shot hit the vending machine with a metallic clang that echoed through the room. The second found flesh. Anita heard the wet impact, heard the man's grunt of pain and surprise. The rifle clattered to the floor, and the shadow behind the machine collapsed, sliding down the wall with a sound like ripping fabric. Silence crashed down around them. Peng was on his feet instantly, gun trained on the fallen man, approaching with predatory caution. Anita pushed herself up on trembling arms, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip, her heart trying to punch through her ribcage. She'd screamed. She'd broken his rule. Don't scream, he'd said, and she'd screamed anyway. But Peng didn't look angry. He checked the body with clinical efficiency, 2 fingers to the neck, a quick search of the pockets, then straightened and turned to face her. His expression was unreadable in the dim light, but his dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons. How did you see him? His voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath it ran a current of something else. Surprise, maybe. Or assessment. I didn't. Anita climbed to her feet, her legs shaking. The jacket had slipped off one shoulder, and she pulled it back up with numb fingers. Not really. Just movement. Behind the machine. I cleared this room. It wasn't an excuse, just a statement of fact. His gaze flicked to the vending machine, then back to her. He must have come in after. Does it matter? Anita surprised herself with the edge in her voice. He's dead now. The corner of Peng's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, and before she could react, his hand came up to her face. She flinched, instinct from too many bad experiences. But he only brushed his thumb across her lower lip, coming away with blood. You bit through, he observed. Then quieter, almost approving. Good instincts. I thought you said not to scream. I said don't scream if they hear you, you won't leave breathing. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with those fathomless eyes. You screamed and I'm still breathing. So I'd say you made the right call. Heat crept up Anita's neck despite everything. Despite the corpse 5 meters away, despite the gunpowder haze in the air, despite the fact that she was having a conversation with a man who'd killed 9 people in the last 20 minutes. Thank you, Peng said simply. 2 words. Just 2 words, but they carried weight. Acknowledgement. Respect, even. Grudging and unfamiliar in his mouth but real nonetheless. You're welcome, Anita whispered. He held her gaze a moment longer, something shifting behind his eyes, some calculation being made, some assessment being revised. Then he nodded once, decisive, and checked his gun. 1 bullet left, he said. We need to move, now. The service stairwell was narrow and suffocating, barely wide enough for Peng's shoulders. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green, turning shadows into something toxic. Anita pressed her back against the cold metal railing, catching her breath while Peng listened at the door above them. They were between floors, not quite basement, not quite ground level. A liminal space where sound seemed to die and time moved differently. The silence was so complete that Anita could hear her own pulse hammering in her ears. Peng stood motionless, head tilted, every line of his body speaking of coiled readiness. But nothing came. No footsteps, no voices. Just the eternal drip of water somewhere in the building's guts, and the whisper of their own breathing. Finally, he lowered his gun and turned back to her. We wait here, he said quietly. 2 minutes. Let them commit to searching the wrong areas. Anita nodded, sinking down to sit on the concrete step. Her legs were trembling again, adrenaline crash hitting hard now that the immediate danger had passed. The jacket pulled around her like a tent, and she pulled it tighter, seeking warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Peng remained standing, but his posture relaxed fractionally. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew something small, a silver case, expensive and monogrammed. Cigarettes, Anita realized as he extracted one with practiced ease. You smoke? The question came out before she could stop it. Occasionally. He produced a lighter, equally elegant, and lit the cigarette with a hand that didn't shake. The flame painted his face in warm tones for a heartbeat, softening the sharp edges before darkness reclaimed him. Usually after killing people. He said it so matter-of-factly that Anita almost laughed. Almost. The sound died in her throat, coming out as something between a sob and a gasp. Peng glanced at her, exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. You're doing well. I don't feel like I'm doing well. Anita wrapped her arms around herself beneath the jacket. I feel like I'm going to fall apart. But you haven't. That's what matters. He took another drag, and in the green emergency light, the burning ember glowed like a small sun. The falling apart comes later. Right now you survive. Silence settled between them again, but it felt different now. Less oppressive, almost companionable, in a strange, broken way. Can I ask you something? Anita's voice was barely above a whisper. You can ask. Why did you come here? To this place specifically? She looked up at him, trying to read his face in the dim light. You said you wanted to. But why? Peng was quiet for a long moment, smoke curling from his lips like dragon's breath. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something new, something cold and ancient and unforgiving. 3 months ago, my younger sister disappeared in Chicago. He tapped ash onto the concrete, watching it fall. She was 17, visiting from Seoul for a student exchange program. One night she went to meet friends and never came home. Anita's breath caught. Oh God. The police were useless. Told us she probably ran away, that teenage girls do this all the time. His jaw tightened, the muscle jumping beneath the skin. But I knew better. I knew what had happened to her. The same people who took me. Yes. The word was flat, final. It took me 2 months to track down their operation. 2 months of following breadcrumbs through the darkest corners of this city. And when I finally found the trail, it led here. He took a final drag from the cigarette and crushed it beneath his expensive shoe with more force than necessary. The ember died, plunging them back into unrelieved green gloom. Your sister, Anita said carefully. Did you find her? Peng's expression went absolutely still, carved from ice and stone. I found what was left of her. 3 weeks ago. In a shipping container bound for Dubai. The words hung in the air like poison. I'm so sorry, Anita whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Don't be. He met her eyes, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. Not grief, though that was present, but rage. Pure, distilled, eternal. The kind of anger that didn't burn hot and fade, but smoldered forever. Patient and implacable. Be grateful instead. Grateful. That I was looking for this place when I heard about a new shipment arriving 3 days ago. His voice dropped to something barely audible. That I decided to come tonight instead of tomorrow. That you were here when I wanted to burn everything to the ground. Understanding crashed over Anita like ice water. She hadn't been rescued. She'd been a fortunate accident, collateral salvation in the path of a man bent on vengeance. You came here to kill them all, she said. Yes. No hesitation, no remorse. Every single one. The loading dock doors were massive, industrial steel painted rust red by time and neglect. Beyond them lay freedom, fresh air, the world Anita had been stolen from 3 days ago. So close she could almost taste it. But between them and those doors stood 3 men. They'd been waiting, smart enough to anticipate this exit, patient enough to let Peng and Anita come to them. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. No cover, no alternate routes, just an open concrete expanse with the exit at one end and 3 armed men at the other. Peng stopped at the edge of the loading area, one arm shooting out to hold Anita back. She felt him go absolutely still beside her, every muscle coiled tight, and when she glanced at his face, what she saw there made her take an involuntary step backward. The man who had given her his jacket was gone. In his place stood something else entirely, something cold and ancient and utterly merciless. His dark eyes had gone flat, shark-like, devoid of anything resembling humanity. His jaw was set in a hard line, and when he breathed, it was slow and controlled, the calm before annihilation. This was the devil of the underground. The largest of the 3 men, broad-shouldered, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, smiled when he saw them. He said something in Russian, gesturing with his pistol, and his companions laughed. He wants to know if I'm here to negotiate, Peng said quietly, his voice empty of inflection. What did you tell him? Nothing yet. Peng's hand moved to his gun, still holstered. But he's about to find out. You only have one bullet left, Anita whispered urgently. There are 3 of them. I know. He glanced at her then, and for just a heartbeat, something human flickered in his eyes. Get behind those crates. When it starts, you close your eyes and count to 30. Don't open them before. Understand, Peng? Do it, now. The command in his voice was absolute. Anita stumbled backward, toward a stack of wooden crates near the wall, her heart jackhammering against her ribs. She pressed herself into the shadows, the jacket wrapped around her like a shroud, and watched as Peng walked forward into the open space. He moved with the fluid grace of a dancer, hands visible, empty, non-threatening. The 3 men tensed, weapons rising slightly, but they didn't fire. Curious, maybe. Or confident in their numbers. The scarred man spoke again, louder now. A question or a demand? Peng answered in Russian, his accent perfect, his tone conversational. Almost friendly. Then he moved. Later, Anita wouldn't be able to describe exactly what happened. It was too fast, too violent, too impossibly coordinated. One moment Peng was standing there, apparently unarmed and vulnerable. The next, he was a blur of motion, closing the distance to the nearest man before the brain could process the movement. His hand shot out, grabbed the man's gun arm, twisted. Bone snapped with a sound like breaking branches. The man's scream was cut short as Peng drove his elbow into his throat with surgical precision. He took the falling man's pistol in the same motion, brought it up, fired. 1 bullet. Center mass. The scarred man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The 3rd man got off a shot, wild, panicked, missing Peng by inches. The bullet sparked off the concrete floor near Anita's feet, and she bit down on her fist to keep from screaming. Peng didn't even flinch. He closed the gap, moving inside the man's guard before he could fire again. The pistol clattered away across the concrete as Peng's fist connected with the man's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Then his hands were around the man's head, one on the chin, one on the back of the skull. The crack echoed through the loading dock like a gunshot. The man crumpled, and Peng let him fall, already turning to check the other 2 bodies with mechanical efficiency. The first man was still wheezing, trying to breathe through his ruined throat. Peng crouched beside him, said something soft in Russian, almost gentle. Then he stood, lifted his foot, and brought it down. Anita turned away, bile rising in her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressed her face against the rough wood of the crates, and counted. 1, 2, 3. At 30, the silence was absolute. It's finished. Peng's voice came from much closer than expected. You can look now. Anita opened her eyes slowly, terrified of what she'd see. But Peng was standing in front of her, blocking her view of the bodies, his expression carefully neutral. There was blood on his shirt, not much, just spatters across the white fabric, and his knuckles were raw. Are you hurt? She asked, the question absurd given everything but the only thing her brain could produce. No. He reached down, offered his hand one final time. Come, we need to leave before more arrive. Anita took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. As they walked toward the loading dock doors, she kept her eyes fixed on his back, refusing to look at what lay scattered across the concrete like broken dolls. The devil had shown her his true face, and somehow, impossibly, she was still alive to tell the tale. The car was a black Mercedes, sleek and expensive, parked in the shadows behind the loading dock where no security camera could catch its plates. Peng opened the passenger door and guided Anita inside with a hand on her elbow, the gesture almost courtly despite the blood still drying on his knuckles. The interior smelled of leather and that same sandalwood scent from his jacket. Anita sank into the seat, her body finally giving up the fight to stay upright. Every muscle trembled with exhaustion, adrenaline crash hitting like a freight train now that safety was within reach. Peng slid into the driver's seat, started the engine with a purr of German engineering, and pulled away from the warehouse without urgency. No squealing tires, no dramatic acceleration, just a smooth legal exit, as if they were leaving a business meeting instead of a massacre. Anita watched the building recede in the side mirror, that hulking concrete tomb where she'd spent 3 days waiting to die. Soon it was just another dark shape against the Chicago skyline, indistinguishable from 1,000 other forgotten industrial spaces. Where are we going? Her voice came out hoarse, scraped raw. Somewhere safe. Peng's eyes never left the road, his hand steady on the wheel at 10 and 2. A hotel, clean, discreet, no questions asked. And then you rest, eat, recover. He navigated through empty streets with the confidence of someone who knew every alley and shortcut. Tomorrow, we discuss what comes next. Anita pulled his jacket tighter around herself, suddenly cold, despite the car's climate control. I don't have any money. I can't pay for a hotel. I'm aware. So why? Because you saved my life tonight. Peng glanced at her briefly. Those dark eyes, unreadable. The man behind the vending machine. If you hadn't warned me, I'd be dead. That creates a debt. I don't want to owe you anything. The words came out sharper than intended, fear and exhaustion making her defensive. You don't. His tone remained neutral. I owe you. There's a difference. They drove in silence for several minutes, the city sliding past in a blur of streetlights and shadowed storefronts. At this hour, Anita checked the dashboard clock. 3:47 a.m. Chicago felt like a ghost town, abandoned and hollow. What happened back there? She said finally, not looking at him. What you did to those men bothers you. Shouldn't it? Peng was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice carried no defensiveness, no justification. Just simple truth. They were traffickers, slavers. They stole you from your life and intended to sell you like property. If I hadn't killed them tonight, they would have done the same thing to someone else tomorrow. So it was justice? No. He turned onto a wider avenue, the Mercedes gliding through a yellow light. It was vengeance. Justice requires courts and laws, and the illusion of civilization. What I did was simply removing predators from the ecosystem. Anita thought about the 3 men in the loading dock, the way Peng had moved through them like a scythe through wheat. Efficient. Merciless. Final. You've done this before, she said, not a question. Many times. And it doesn't bother you? At all? Peng's jaw tightened fractionally. I stopped asking myself that question a long time ago. The answer was interfering with necessary work. The honesty was almost more disturbing than violence itself. At least the men who'd kidnapped her had probably lied to themselves, constructed narratives where they were just businessmen meeting market demand. But Peng had no such delusions. He knew exactly what he was. Wore his monstrosity like that expensive suit. Perfectly tailored. Impossible to ignore. They pulled up in front of a boutique hotel on the edge of downtown. Elegant and understated. The kind of place where the staff were trained to see nothing, remember nothing, ask nothing. Peng killed the engine and turned to face her fully. Your old life ended 3 days ago when they took you. What you do with what comes after, that's your choice. But understand this, you can't go back. Not to who you were before. How do you know? Anita's voice broke. How can you possibly know that? Because I see it in your eyes. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of matted hair behind her ear. The gesture was unexpectedly gentle, at odds with everything she'd witnessed tonight. You're not the same woman who got into that van. The world showed you its teeth, and you survived. That changes people. Fundamentally. Tears burned behind Anita's eyes, hot and unwelcome. She blinked them back furiously, refusing to break down now, not after holding it together through everything else. I don't know how to be this person, she whispered. No one does. At first, Peng withdrew his hand, reached into the back seat, and produced a small duffel bag. Clean clothes, toiletries, cash. Everything you need for the next few days. He handed her a key card. Room 1504. Top floor. Don't answer the door for anyone except me. When will I see you again? Tomorrow evening. I have some things to handle first. He paused, then added quietly. You're safe now, Anita. I give you my word. The hotel room was obscenely luxurious compared to the concrete cell. King bed with crisp white linens, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering sprawl of Chicago. Marble bathroom with a rainfall shower that probably cost more than Anita's monthly rent used to. Used to. Past tense. Because Peng was right, her old life was gone, incinerated in the basement of that warehouse along with the men who'd stolen her. She stood at the window still wearing his jacket over her filthy dress, watching the city wake up. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene after the night she'd endured. Somewhere down there, people were starting their normal days, coffee runs, morning commutes, complaints about traffic and weather. The mundane machinery of civilization grinding forward, oblivious to the violence that had unfolded in the shadows. A knock at the door made her jump. It's me, Peng's voice came through, calm and unmistakable. Anita crossed the room and opened the door. He'd changed clothes, different suit, this one charcoal gray with a subtle sheen, paired with a burgundy tie. The blood was gone, the violence erased, leaving only the polished exterior of a successful businessman. If she'd passed him on the street, she never would have guessed what those hands were capable of. I thought you said tomorrow evening, she said. I did. But there's something I need to give you first. He stepped inside, and she caught the scent of his cologne. Expensive, understated, probably Italian. May I? Anita nodded, closing the door behind him. Peng reached into his inner jacket pocket and withdrew a small black box, the kind that might hold jewelry. He opened it to reveal a ring, heavy gold with an intricate engraving she couldn't quite make out in the dim light. Some kind of symbol, Eastern in origin, that seemed to writhe and shift as she looked at it. "This is my signet ring," he said quietly. "It bears the mark of my family. More importantly, it bears my personal seal. I don't understand. In my world, this ring is a promise, a guarantee." He lifted it from the box, the gold catching the morning light. "Anyone who sees it knows that the bearer is under my protection. Untouchable." Anita's breath caught. "Peng, I can't." "You can. You will." His tone left no room for argument. "The men who took you were part of a larger network. When they realize what happened to their operation, they'll look for witnesses. They'll look for you." Fear spiked through her chest, cold and sharp. "But you killed everyone." "I killed everyone in that building. The organization extends far beyond one facility." He held the ring out to her. "This ensures that when they find you, and they will find you, they'll know that touching you means going to war with me. And they won't risk it. They're criminals, not suicidal." Something that might have been grim humor flickered across his face. "I have a certain reputation for being disproportionate in my responses to perceived slights." Anita stared at the ring, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Protection, yes. Safety. But also a chain, binding her to him and his world of blood and shadows. "What do you want from me in return?" she asked carefully. "Nothing, right now." Peng's dark eyes held hers. "But someday I may ask for a favor. And when I do, I'll expect you to remember this night. A blank check, a debt of honor." There's a difference, was there? Anita wasn't sure anymore. The lines between right and wrong had blurred somewhere between the basement and the loading dock, leaving her in moral territory she didn't recognize. But what choice did she have? Go back to her apartment and hope the traffickers never found her? Trust the police who hadn't come when she was taken? Rely on a system that had already failed her once? Slowly she extended her hand. Peng slid the ring onto her right index finger. It was too large, meant for a man's hand, but he adjusted it with a small twist, and it tightened somehow, conforming to her finger like it had been made for her. "Keep this with you always," he said. "If you're ever in danger, show it. If that doesn't work, there's a number engraved on the inside. Call it. Someone will come. You? Or someone who answers to me." He closed her fingers gently around the ring. "You're not alone anymore, Anita. For better or worse, you're part of my world now." He reached into his pocket again and produced a business card, matte black with silver lettering. Just a name and a phone number, no title, no address. "This is my direct line. Use it if you need anything. Anything at all." Anita took the card with trembling fingers, staring at the name embossed in elegant script. "Peng Ho. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Don't." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "What I did tonight wasn't altruism. It was catharsis. You just happened to benefit from my rage." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her one final time. In the morning light, he looked younger somehow, the hard edges of the devil softened by exhaustion and something that might have been regret. "Rest," he said quietly. "Heal. Try to find some piece of yourself that survived. And when you're ready to face what comes next, call me." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with finality. Anita walked back to the window and watched the street below. A few minutes later, the black Mercedes pulled away from the hotel, sliding into traffic with the same unhurried grace Peng brought to everything: walking, killing, saving lives. She watched until the car disappeared around a corner, swallowed by the city. The ring was heavy on her finger. A promise. A chain. A lifeline. She was safe. She was trapped. She was alive. And somewhere in the labyrinth of Chicago's underworld, the dragon who'd rescued her was already moving on to his next hunt, leaving her behind with nothing but his protection and the terrible knowledge of what he was capable of. Anita Shumate pressed her forehead against the cool glass and finally, let herself cry. Thanks for watching. Please like, comments, and subscribe.